everyone. I'm Kat, and I should be talking to you about bridging the platform empathy gap, but I would like to talk to you instead about a conference that I went to 8 months ago. So I joined my company now about that time, and my COO, so she's the one in the purple top, is a bit of a conference nut. So on my first week, she was like, "Hey, do you want to join a conference with me and hang out?" And I was like, "Okay." Turns out we were sponsoring, so I was stood at a stall trying to explain the product from like week 2, but that was cool. What I'm actually most excited about this conference, though, is it's a conference called DevOps Days London. I don't know if any of you all have heard about it or been. It's mainly about DevOps, platform engineering, the interactions of people in that space, really interesting. But why I want to talk about it is open spaces. So it's the first conference I've been to where they have a combination of talks in the morning and then open spaces in the afternoon where everyone who's attended gets to choose a topic, and the most popular ones go into breakout spaces. And there are about 50 or so people, and they just chat about whatever topic they want to go to. And the one that most interested me was called Platform Engineering. What works, what doesn't? And this isn't the platform engineering one. It was much, much busier. And I turned up late, so I was walking across this room that was full of people trying to find the only seat at the other side of the room, which was nice and embarrassing. But I started by just listening. I'm a product manager, so a bit of an imposter in this platform engineer space, and wanted to hear what they were talking about. And what I heard sort of surprised me. So they were saying things like, things were good before we started scaling. The devs now have no idea what they're doing. Developers need clear guardrails, otherwise they break things. They just ignore the platform and do whatever they want. I have to help our developers with everything. It's so tiring. It had me a bit like this, of what's going on. So I, for all my sins, started my career as a developer. I didn't last very long. And I never had that impression of the people who were helping me with my infrastructure or my platform. And that's just had me confused. They were so frustrated, not in a mean way, not in a I hate these platform engineers way, but in what's going on? Why aren't they doing things right? Why are they acting like children and going absolutely crazy? Why are they acting like cowboys and just building stuff off system? What is happening? And I was asking myself the whole time I was listening to this, because I've been in platform engineering for a while now, why are platform engineers so frustrated by their users? And this is a question that has been resonating with me for a little while. And now that I've had some time to think about it, I've come up with some hypotheses, and I'm going to take you on a journey with them, and hopefully they make sense, and hopefully you understand them, and maybe I can give you some tips about how I've dealt with this problem. Why is there frustration? Why is there this gap? And this is my hypothesis 1, which is moving from DevOps to platform engineering created an empathy gap. And I'm sure you know the definition, but I want to make it really, really clear and highlight it. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And this is really, really crucial when it comes to software development, because when you're trying to collaborate or do anything with anyone, empathy is so important. And it's also really hard, because I don't know if any of you have had a sibling that would steal all of your snacks from the cupboard before you got a chance to eat them. You lose a little bit of empathy for that person. You've got that one friend who always asks you for advice and never takes it. You lose the empathy for them. So that empathy gap grows really easily, even with people that you love and care about. So it's even harder with people that you never speak to or talk to on a daily basis. And to prove it, I'm going to tell you about Monty. This is Monty. He is a Monstera Adanisi, and I got him during lockdown. So I moved in with my new partner, and he bought a new build flat, which meant all of the walls were white, all of the carpets were grey, and the windows were floor to ceiling. And it was one of the most depressing places to stay when you're locked in a house and you can't go anywhere. So I bought Monty, and I fell in love with Monty a little bit. He got a lot of one-on-one care. He got a lot of TLC. I spent most of my time making sure he was fed. He had the most beautiful little pot, that his leaves got dusted every day. But it did spark something in me. And this is I'm a DevOps engineer here, right? I've got one-on-one care with Monty. We're tight. My developer, Monty, is with me, operations, hand in hand. But it got out of hand. I started getting more plants, and at this point I was okay. Imagine I've got 2 or 3 developer teams, me operations looking after them. They still got some care, they had special food still, their leaves were dusted, it was okay, it was manageable. And then it gets a little bit silly, and this is when platform engineering sort of comes into things. where you try and make things consolidated across the board. This was repotting day. So everyone gets repotted on the same day. Everyone gets fed on the same day. Everyone's treated the same. And then it gets really silly and you end up watering all your plants in a bathtub because it takes you too long to water them individually. And this is when that empathy gap has completely broken down and it's really, really wide and platform engineering hasn't really worked. And you can see here like little bits of brown spots. They started dying. Some of them are a little bit floppy. Monty isn't in the best state in this point. And this is when it's all fall apart. So actually that gap is really easy to build when you're required to look after more and more teams. You're asked to support more and more people. Which leads me to hypothesis 2. The larger the empathy gap, the lower adoption of your platform. So in my last slide, I've got all my plants in a bathtub. I can leave them in a bathtub because they can't go anywhere. They don't have legs. They don't have any alternative. They are stuck in my house in those pots. In case you haven't noticed, developers can leave. And as I said at the beginning, they do what they want. They build their shadow IT. They go off system. And I've got some stories that will... Oh, actually, they're coming later. So this one I want to say is software usage is simply logging into your platform and engaging with it, whereas software adoption is leveraging and using that platform to reap its benefits. So this is the difference between usage and adoption. You probably, if you've got a platform, everyone's using it, but they're doing the bare minimum. They're not adopting that platform properly. They're not actually seeing the benefits of it, and they're not really leveraging it to get the best that you can. It's just like, I log in, I request my resources, and then I do stuff off system. And here are some stories that hopefully illustrate that for you. So I spoke to a very, very good friend of mine, and I bought him a pint, and I asked him to tell me some stories about his experiences with platform engineering. And this is his first one. So he was working for an energy company, like really old school, big energy company. And they had this massive monolithic architecture, therefore they had a massive monolithic infrastructure to match the monolithic architecture. And what that meant was anytime you wanted to make any changes, it was really, really, really slow. We're talking like 24 hours just to get a response for the team to say, we'll put you on the roadmap 6 months down the line. So the teams would use it as little as possible, which meant they were batching all of their changes up in a really, really big way, so nothing was getting through. The feedback loops were, 6 months long. It was just very, very difficult. And it just meant that the software didn't work and it wasn't effective. They actually missed their roadmap release by about 18 months, which meant competitors had come in and taken over their market share. So I think that team was actually canned a couple of months ago. So not effective. Big empathy gap because it's too slow. The next one was an education company. And their platform was notorious for having these frequent universal blackouts. The best story he told me at the time was they had this big problem with AWS where all their services went out and they couldn't get it back online again, and they realized they needed to go into the main console and they needed the master key for it. The week before, they'd fired their CTO. Guess who was the only person with the password? It took them another week after that fact to actually get it back online again, and that just meant that any services that were reliant on that AWS instance were offline for that time, didn't work. He said that it was fine for his team because they built their own platform. They built their own cloud. They were serving all of their traffic through their own cloud instance. And I was like, hang on a second, doesn't that mean that your company is paying twice for the exact same thing? You've got a platform team that are spending all of their energy and time building something while you're doing the exact same thing in your team and wasting all of that time and energy. And he was like, yes, it does. So again, really poor adoption because it's unreliable. They haven't thought about their users. There's that big empathy gap. And the final one he told me was he worked at a neobank. I mean, it does make him sound like he's a bit of a flip-flopper career changer, but he was in consulting, so it's a little bit different. And this neobank they'd done some automation, right? They had a really big need. It's compliance landscapes. They needed to be able to track all of their audit log changes. So if they had a new feature go through, they needed to track all the changes against that from idea to delivery. And their platform team had done an okay job. They'd had a system where if you linked a Jira ticket, it would track all the way through to production. It would go through all the CI/CD. You could see all the commits and changes, great audit log. But it was really manual for the teams to set up that Jira to get integration. So once you'd had your Jira ID, you could push it through, but doing that for every change you wanted to make, so they were trying to do continuous delivery, was really, really painful. So they just bundled everything together. So that audit log wasn't representative of the changes that actually went through the system. So the low adoption was gaming the system, and actually they were probably out of compliance, hence me not naming the neobank, because those audit logs weren't representative of what they wanted to do. And this was one drink. Actually, I think it was half his drink. He was able to tell me these stories and was like, do you want me to keep going? And I said, there isn't a slide big enough. So I'm sure every other application developer has similar stories to this, and on not having a way to close that gap and having that empathy with your users makes it really, really hard to have any effective adoption of your platform. Which led me to hypothesis 3, which is platforms with low adoption will fail. And to talk about this, I want to talk about what a successful platform would look like. And I often get asked this question, and I would ask it whenever I worked with someone who wanted to build a platform, was like, what would platform success look like for you? And there were two answers. The first one would be a list of features, which is when I would have an immediate panic and have to go back and try and figure out what their answer 2 was, which is what are the outcomes that you hope your platform will achieve for you. And there were 3 things that came out of it. So the first one was they want it to be cheaper. So you need to be able to do everything I'm doing today, but it costs me less. I want to be spending less on my infrastructure. I want to be spending less on my pipelines. I want to be spending less on my tools and technology because every team's using their own thing. Cheaper. Second is quicker. So I want to be able to do things faster. I want my application engineers focusing on application development. I don't want them focusing on DevOps. I don't want them focusing on my CI/CD or observability or what tools they want to use. I want them to focus on actually getting value in the hands of end users quickest. And the last one was safer. So in that story I was telling you about the neobank, having one platform that you can use to track everything and do all your changes and put all your guardrails in, that's a goal for a lot of C-suite or head of platform people. But hopefully my examples that I told you earlier illustrated that to have any of those things, developers need to be using the platform as intended. If your developers aren't using it as intended, you will not see those benefits. And actually you might have the alternate effect, which is things are more expensive, or they go slower, or you're out of compliance and you're going to fined a lot of money. And this is one that I just put this in there so that to remind you, without developers adopting your platform, you do not have a successful platform, just to really hammer that point home. So, my 3 hypotheses. Moving from DevOps to platform engineering create an empathy gap. The larger the empathy gap, the lower your platform adoption. And if you have low adoption, your platform will fail, which led me to thinking platforms with a large empathy gap will also fail. So this is where the empathy gap is so important, and what do you really need to focus on it, and what can you do about it? Number 1, define a North Star metric. This is where the product management comes in. North Star metric is a tool that was developed maybe by Google or Spotify, but Amplitude, this QR code, will send you to the Amplitude North Star metric framework, and it's very, very comprehensive. They have something much shorter. But a North Star metric is, if someone's paying you for something, what are they paying for? It's that one thing that people are trying to achieve with your product. And this is really important and exciting. So Spotify is the number of minutes listened to, because that shows if people listen to more minutes, they're getting more value out of their product, they're more likely to pay you for it. For YouTube, it's number of videos watched. For Google, number of searches that you successfully complete. These are all like, what is that fast user interaction that means your product is doing the thing it's supposed to. So you should define a North Star metric. I think they're really, really important for focusing on what you're trying to achieve. Here we go. There's a good description from someone from the product school, which is it condenses everything your product is really aiming to do above all other functions. The second point, and this all comes back to the empathy gap piece, is make it related to adoption. So the adoption, and that's the actual getting benefit from your platform, not just using your platform, is the number 1 key point here. And then the third thing that you should do once you've figured out what your adoption metric is, so it might be number of pull requests onto your YAML templates, I don't know, it could be people actually requesting resources. What is that thing? You need to understand why developers don't adopt your platform, and this is something that I hear a lot of people miss, and it's so important because you are not Spotify when you're building your platform or your product. You have a very limited audience at an organization because you only have a finite number of developers, and if you lose them, you're going to have to spend a lot more energy trying to get them back. So understand why they aren't using your platform and build into that. And there are a few reasons why people don't use products. So 1, it isn't valuable. It means it doesn't help them do the job they need to do. You can figure this out by thinking about jobs to be done. You can do it by shadowing that person. How do you get your resources provisioned? How do you do observability today? So figure out if it's valuable and then build those features. Second is it isn't usable. So if it is incredibly complicated to deploy, to use the system, then they're not going to use it. Or more often than not, it's both. It isn't usable and it isn't valuable either. And then you're right back to the drawing board. So make sure you shadow people, make sure you do your user research. So to summarize, because my time's up, platform engineers frustrated due to this platform empathy gap. Large empathy gaps mean low adoption. Bridge that gap and make adoption your North Star metric so you know you've got a successful platform that's been adopted, and then fix the reasons why developers don't adopt your platform. Thank you. I've been Kat. That's been my pretty fast talk. Sorry, I overran a bit. And this is what Monty's like now, because people often ask how he's doing. He didn't do great, but there are lots of babies. Thank you.
Great talk, love it. Thank you. How do you approach making sure that the platform gets acknowledged in the North Star metric, that it doesn't, that the work on the platform doesn't get the credit for what it does?
So I think there are a variety. I would treat North Star metric for your platform as a product in itself. So this is your platform is the product. There might be a North Star metric in the wider organization, but it's not yours for your team. And you define it. So what does success look like for your users? And this is why it's an empathy gap. You need to talk to them. You need to understand what they want to do. So if that is their goal is to request resources, track how they request their resources and make it something that is very measurable so that you can check it on a week-by-week basis of, are people using it? Are they not? How do I pivot? How do I improve that?
Yeah. But how do you ensure that the North Star for the business acknowledges the work the platform's doing for it?
So
to make sure that you're resourced to deliver that.
Yeah. So there's I've got another talk that you can look up and I can share it with you afterwards, which is all about how do you connect your overall organizational goals down to the platform. And it's about making that connection of like, if I am able to have people request their resources faster, it means that developers are able to do things quicker and it's cheaper for you, which helps align with your deliver X for your end users. I think trying to make that too obvious a connection. So I've seen platform teams that will put their North Star as something end user facing, so an end consumer, and that always fails because you have no control over that pipeline. So you need to keep it something you control. And this is where support from CTOs, head of platforms, head of clouds, people with influence are able to support you. You're welcome.